Okay, we're up once again. I haven't even drank for almost 24 hours, so we'll be bringing that to an end fairly soon. But, um, yeah. So, sorry.
Round two.
Yep, I was just hearing myself through the 10-second delay of the beginning. Um,
Oh, okay.
as I said, Tom, I have no other windows open on my end, and we are at 4 viewers. So that's
Nice.
probably our peak from the last time, our last project of this nature, wasn't it? Um, yes, we got Kilithius moderating the situation here for us. Much obliged. One of our other known associates. So, into introductions proper, just pretending, our 3 or 4 viewers tonight haven't caught on or didn't catch I almost said last month's. It's just barely not last month's broadcast, Tom. Aren't we punctual?
I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, yeah,
3 weeks
close to.
ago.
I think we
Yeah.
just skipped a week, but yeah, or a week or two. Yeah,
So,
yeah, close enough for government work.
last month's broadcast. So, welcome to Steel and Strategy. This is our combination blacksmithing shop talk and gaming stream. So tonight we're kind of just doing a little enhanced edition of the premiere 3 weeks ago, partly as a result of losing about a half hour of the audio as a result of my own rank incompetence of our co-host Tom here tonight. Tom's one of my longtime associates of the operation. We collaborate in many different ways on many different things. He runs his own show of a very different nature, which we'll definitely get into. Um, so, Tom, thanks for helping me, get this back off the ground here.
You betcha.
And yeah, so I guess we can get right into introductions. So I'm Matt. I run Lighthammer Forge. For over 2 years, we've joked about getting this stream off the ground, and I think it's really something that there seems to be some demand and interest in. Just vibing out, maybe playing some video games later on, but mostly just talking shop to start here and now. Tonight, we're principally discussing the business side of this work, not through the lens or the insinuation of me being some brilliant mind in regards to that whole situation, but more so just as I have experienced it. Tom here, as I said, knows a little bit about running a growing side hustle of one flavor or another as well, so he's going to be able to hang out and provide some insights, as well as just kind of serve as moderator slash co-host about the topics at hand. It's going to be a little more straightforward, advice focused. Again, based on my own personal experience. Your mileage may vary. Consult a relevant professional. I'm not liable if you end up in a predicament as a result of following any of this. Yada yada. Um, so yeah, Tom, want to talk a little bit about what you do, some of your projects, major accolades, because there have been multiple. Obviously, some of the projects that we've collaborated on, and in short, why, while you're not necessarily a blacksmith or a full-on fabricator, um, what we work together and why you probably know what you're talking about for the most part.
Sure. So I'm a member of Explosive Enterprises. That is a YouTube channel. We basically do airsoft reviews, getting pretty in depth about some of them is kind of our shtick. Uh, Generally focusing more on our areas of expertise. I say we because I am one of several collaborators on that channel. I focus more on like a specific niche of airsoft, which is just like basically simulated explosives. A couple of my other teammates, one of them, Ross Radford, is a big contributor there. He is more into the gas blowback rifles. Again, some pretty niche topics, but we're a growing channel, and people do appreciate the content that we put out. I do have a background, little bit in kind of sort of engineering. I would describe as sort of a generalist when it comes to being in the shop. The word maker is probably a little bit overused these days, but
Hmm.
frankly, as someone who's not professionally educated in any of the stuff that I really get into it, and the fact that I spread pretty wide and thin in terms of my levels of expertise when it comes to making stuff, I would say that maker is probably a pretty adequate way to describe it. Or again, generalist. From the business side, I actually have considerably less experience than you, and I've reached out to you multiple times, just kind of sort of mulling stuff around in my head in terms of starting stuff off.
Yeah.
So these kinds of discussions are always valuable for me as well. You and I have collaborated on a couple of different projects. nothing necessarily directly business related, but like as a bouncing ideas off of each other and using each other's fabrication capabilities and skills to actually get things across the line. I've helped you out a couple times with some 3D printing projects.
Yeah,
I have a little bit of a CAD background, so I can kind of help out with that side of things. And I've been into 3D printing pretty much as long as it's been a consumer level product. So back in the early 2000s, when some of those RepRap patents expired, I was really, really interested in the technology. So I've been pretty, I'll say, kept up with that for the past couple of decades. So I have a little bit of expertise there. In terms of stuff that you've helped me out with, obviously a lot of the metalworking stuff. We've done some blacksmithing projects together. I know you've helped
absolutely.
me make some touch hole clearing
Hmm.
devices, like touch hole picks for black powder weapons.
Which we both shoot.
Obviously the
Yeah.
bottle openers and stuff like that, because obviously drinking stuff pretty critical to
Oh,
this
right.
entire
Yes, as
operation.
we
So yeah,
very
having those
clearly.
around in large quantities is always very, very important to the success of any of our endeavors. And beyond that, we've worked on some larger, just sort of like general metalworking projects. Our airsoft tank is a big one that I can think of. Basically,
Hmm.
building a gigantic steel or aluminum frame for a 6x6 ATV. That was a pretty cool one. Got to mess around with a bunch of different. I wouldn't. Well, technologies is probably a fair word, I suppose. A bunch of different technologies and manufacturing methods that I hadn't played around with before. Um, and I'm sure there's a bunch more that are just not immediately coming to me, but needless to say, we're bouncing ideas off of each other quite frequently when it comes to that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm obviously happy to take credit where it's fair to do so. But one thing I did want you to touch on for sure is your accolades and some of the different events you guys been recognized at and what projects that recognition was for.
Sure.
Oh yeah, it's I have you like all the way cranked in Streamlabs. I think I overcorrected. We should be in better shape now.
Oh, understood. I was
It
moving my mic around.
probably shouldn't be as much or as required on your end. Yeah, I just knocked you down. Probably not even 10% to negative 6.5 decibels. Looks good now. Thanks,
Perfect.
brother. Um,
Yeah, accolades wise.
yeah, because
So
a
our
lot of people
YouTube.
don't realize, or people outside one, just circling back to some of the projects we've collaborated on, tying it into blacksmithing and the business of this work. One of them was the vest hangers. Second
Oh
only
yeah.
to yourself, my buddy Anthony, who bought no small quantity of them last year. Actually, I think one of my single biggest customers still. Might be popping on to join us for a bit later or watching the recording. But that was a prime example of something you came up with. I actually showed you some other like random high end coat hanger some random guy made that I thought was cool. You're like, hey, you know what doesn't exist in any remotely worthwhile commercial version, because you said there were plastic ones that just keep snapping and
Oh
numerous
yeah.
other
Yep.
situations. So that was one thing we came up with, which I've since started selling. Um, but so yeah, circling back to you. As far as accolades go, what a lot of people necessarily don't realize if they're not um, versed in the airsoft space or know anyone who's like really into it, they still think of it as 3 or 4 jerk offs in their backyard shooting each other with clear plastic guns from the
As
sporting
often
goods
as that
stores
is the case, but
who don't
yes.
even which you can't even get anymore. But people don't realize like there was the one, was it a few years ago, like the mock firearms expo you guys did at the one field, and like there's literally like
Yes. Yeah.
awards
Yeah.
ceremonies for this crap now, for lack of a better
100%.
catch-all
Yeah.
term, and you've been to multiple and
Um,
recognized at multiple. So talk about your I don't know, your favorite accomplishments on that front, every bit as much as your favorite projects.
yeah. So some of the stuff is like participating in contests. Certain fields or larger establishments will run like a contest for Design X or whatever. Like we built a set of passive exoskeletons that were designed to carry around airsoft gear. A couple of miniguns in our case, and we've had a couple different designs of those. Some that we haven't submitted to contests, just that we built because we think they're fucking awesome. But yeah, like that exoskeleton that we've submitted to that contest, that was a winner there. Beyond that, in terms of like official stuff, our YouTube channel's been recognized uh, in a couple different ways. We have a couple different awards there. Like we were rated best airsoft channel by a smaller airsoft news outlet, which is pretty cool. Popular Airsoft. We also have had one of our specific videos, which was not created by myself, but was created by one of my teammates. which is just like a general tutorial video about how to get into a specific facet of airsoft. It's a little bit more opaque to some people, which is like gas blowback weapons. That was pretty well received, and we did win an award for that one as well.
Even just your
Yeah, beyond that, I
subscriber
mean,
count lately, you've seen last
yeah,
year or so
exactly. I
pretty
mean, yeah,
significant growth.
just peaked over 30,000 subscribers, which is
Holy
certainly
sh!
still a relatively small channel
Okay.
as airsoft stuff goes. But or I
Well,
guess
well,
I should
again,
say
as we
for the
discussed
worst
in
too. That's mid-size for sure.
I say, as we discussed in
Um,
private before, you also started out with some very specific subject matter, and even
percent.
as you've broadened, your coverage a little bit, you're still not just one of these random, guy with a GoPro running around committing Class C felonies at some field
You know,
that he, gets away with because he's 5 states away from home. So you were, yeah, 30,000 subs. I thought you were still like under 25, by the way, because I haven't tuned in a minute, I confess. So that's fucking awesome. But B, like you still cover a very specific corner.
we
With,
do.
with the
Yeah,
occasional
even
exception of like a gun review or some tutorial stuff.
and I think that's really where the credit is due because I mean, yeah, the fact that even at this point, we're sort of starting to break into some more Main Street topics. Frankly, just as we run out of stuff to talk about regarding some of the more niche topics, which is maybe helping us out a little bit. But yeah, the ability to actually uh, get that kind of a subscriber following, given the incredibly specific nature of the topics that we generally discuss, is really pretty impressive. And I think that does speak to the nature of the reviews that we do, which are just very straightforward, well put together, well edited. Which honestly, like,
Yeah.
as much of a cliche as it sounds like, I think the production value and actually putting a modicum of effort into the way that you edit your videos, making sure your lighting is good, that we use half decent cameras, that we actually, again, like, mix our audio and our music and stuff like that correctly. I do think that goes a long way. And I think maybe one of the best comments that we've gotten, like, sort of a sideways compliment, but sort of not, because I mean, I completely understand. Like, there are YouTube channels that are in my playlist that are the exact same thing. People said that they fall asleep to our
I was
channel's
just about to talk
one
about how
playlist,
you actually
which is
narrate
which
at
is
a
pretty
sensible
awesome.
decibel and multiple other.
Yeah, so I mean, we're not screaming, we're not like, "Hey guys," that kind of, like, hype beast stuff. We're very, very
Right,
measured.
Sean? Hey guys.
Try to
That's
try to
Sean
keep
as the
things.
engineer
Yeah, exactly. No,
streamer bit
none of that
that he
stuff.
does.
Yeah, try to keep things a little bit lower key, present the information in a straightforward and, not begging for subscribers or
Yeah.
anything like that kind of way. Um, yeah,
No, that's actually a great transition. Even those last 3 points specifically are largely what we're going to aim for when doing this tonight. So I'm going to uh, simmer down as best I can without a Heineken anytime, any closer than 2 floors from me, and get right back into it here. So I guess to further introduce myself here, so I say I'm Matt. I run Lighthammer Forge. Um, this is just kind of what I finally referred to as a hobby that pretends it's a side business for me. Um, I'm not necessarily likely quitting my day job doing this crap anytime
yeah,
soon, but it is absolutely escalating significantly past the point of simply expecting to pay a bar tab with my net earnings at this point, which is good to see. So yes, I feel like I'm certainly not running one of these 4,000 sale accounts that all opened in 2021 because they mostly resale other crap, but do make some of their own shit as well. I feel like relative to the time investment that I put in, when adjusted for the time pissed away at my personal, with my personal projects, because you have to have those. I feel like, yeah, okay, maybe I do have some insights to provide or some knowledge or information that someone out there might find useful. So that's up to the viewer, and we're just going to get right into it here. Here's the first and foremost item this evening is that if you didn't know, this is what's called work. And if you are $250,000 in debt, like one kid who posted on one of the groups a few years ago, expecting this to be your ticket, your Harbor Freight anvil and your estate sale 3-pound sledgehammer and some scrap rebar and whatever you may or may not make out of it to be your ticket out of that situation, which is a situation that certainly sucks to be in. We're not saying otherwise. This is not the case, and I'm among it's seemingly few people in our space that want to acknowledge that reality. So for all you R passive income types, thinking you're going to barely put in as much work as you do posting, or posting to Amazon print on demand, a stolen notebook design from Canva to make 3 cents a sale before the cease and desist order hits, you're not really going to have a better time making plant hooks relative to the effort expended, right? So getting into some of the more specific advice from there. Item one was, I think, one we really enjoyed discussing. I almost said last week.
Yeah.
Last go around, Tom, was I'm not normally much into the larger worldview of the, for lack of a better catch-all term, hustle grind bros. But I guess we will borrow one specific metaphor they like insofar as everything being in a fight, or being a fight rather. So, until you get, unless we want to get way off into the weeds and talk about peak Sun Tzu shit. How do you win a fight, Tom? I think the first very important step is to be in the goddamn ring, right? And
For sure.
profanity a little bit. So, what does this have to do with the blacksmithing or the business side of blacksmithing, or really any other kind of micro business level, selling crafty stuff? Well, internet search algorithms are so. All right, one more swear, and then I'm done for a while because it's just such a delightful phrase after hearing it for the first time on Aliens Dark Descent. Internet search algorithms are just so shithoused in this state of our timeline that you can run the same search from a couple different computers, the same computer, consecutively, within moments of each other, and get radically different results, with there being no evidence that it's a result of clicking something in particular or like any actual filtration mechanism. So what does that mean for us? Something pretty darn cool, actually. It means that you don't, vis-a-vis 10 years ago, you don't have to be the cheapest or the highest quality or the most well photographed item, or be the person who has that an item that is any of those things for listed for sale, to stand to make a little bit of money at the very least. I myself have put off for months, if not years, making a particular kind of item just because I see that 10, 12 other people make objectively better ones. Again, most of them are resellers, but that's another rant. I eventually bite the bullet and post up anyway, and I am, again, not paying for my truck's newish engine with this income, but it doesn't end badly very much.
Yeah, fair enough.
Insofar as
is that to say that SEO, search engine optimization, is not really important, or is that not necessarily a thing in the age of AI? Where, again, you mentioned that you get kind of different results, or is there some sort of marketing trick that you could really play there?
In as much as I've been able to surmise, I am not an SEO marketing whatever expert. I'm skeptical of a great many of them. Am I going to sit here and advocate someone blow their a normal a normal paycheck at their $40,000 a year job to hire one of these guys to tell you to make sure there's a few hashtags at the end of your Etsy listing description? No. But do I attribute no small amount of my success to things like the Etsy advertising system, where you can pay a flat rate per day? I keep it at the minimum a vast majority of the time, which I think just $1, and it doesn't even always seem to charge you unless people actually click those ads. Do I attribute no small amount of my pretty significant spike the last couple of years in views and exposure to my shop to that service? Absolutely. Just because of process of elimination, like something's got to be, doing this in terms of, my principal social media channels on Facebook and Instagram haven't, massively exploded. So as more eyeballs are coming from somewhere, and I figure that's, got to be what it is. Not just, or to say nothing of the, a significantly higher quantity of listings I now have. So more potential targets to hit. So yeah, if you're on the fence about making S-hooks and copper money clips from couplers bought from the hardware store that's forgotten to mark them up for probably 6 consecutive price increases, so it's not even worth my aggravation to order copper, or innumerable other items, by all means, give it a shot. It'll probably end pretty well for you. And then that takes us to item 2. Yes, Tom, I don't have to have you playing co-host quite as much because I'm honestly not tabbed
Remember
into the
from last
game
time.
because we're just
There you go.
vibing. I am liking this vibe of just using the main menu of Mechanicus as our
As your backdrop, it's not
placeholder
bad.
animation.
It's
It
not bad.
feels it feels like what I think we do when we hang out in my basement. Like this is
Yeah.
what I think it is, and
That makes sense.
that's the vibe of the stream. Tonight.
Gathered around. Yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah,
fair
right,
enough.
yeah.
We just need the big rotating globe. We're good to
Right,
go.
we got servo skulls flying around again, just like in the thumbnail image, and in my
Strategium looking.
and in my shop as we speak. So,
Of course.
what else? Sorry. So yeah, taking us into our next item, and that deals with in-person craft and vendor shows. A lot of people in our space like to, in my opinion, come dangerously close to talking about them as some kind of panacea. Very fun word I fairly recently rediscovered. And they can be a blast. I mean, there's other reasons, whether it's just being involved in the community. Sometimes they happen, adjacent to something else interesting. Like my town does them during the car show every week, and like and not denying there being other reasons to attend and set up at them. Many of them on the smaller side are quite cheap to do. So I've had a few where I've done very well, full stop. I've had plenty more where I haven't, which is the hang up. So in terms of the return that I have seen when it comes to committing X resources, getting Y output, real, it's stealing strategy. We might as well just look at life as one long, 4X game, right? In terms of that, I have, as I said, gotten vastly more out of, banging out some product to toss up on Etsy. Can do that from my shop, maybe have a friend or two over and drink afterwards, work on, our own silly projects, and not have to worry about scrambling to get a table full of product ready for a show in a week and a half. A lot of these places or shows don't always happen at venues where you can pull straight up to your spot. So sometimes I'm making 5 or 6 trips from the parking lot, 600 feet a piece, carrying 40 pounds of crap at a time. Miraculously not getting a hernia at this point. And it's usually always about this time of year. Like, plenty of them bleed into the fall too. There's some indoor ones that happen in the winter, yada yada. There's your mileage may vary depending on where you live, but it's mostly it's mostly a hotter weather thing around here. So it becomes, as I said, dangerously close to not necessarily yielding much return on its investment, depending on how much you bring, depending on the size of the event. There's obviously a lot of people I know who do quite well at some of the bigger shows. So my only takeaway here, or advice with this particular topic, is to say, temper your expectations. I'm not going to say not to try one or two, even earlier in your selling career, but just sort of be mindful of what you can reasonably expect out of them. A lot of the bigger ones as well. I just saw I have this all jotted down. You can't necessarily just set up at like Joe Schmo can usually at like some of the bigger world's largest yard sales and other crap that happens around here, the flea markets and such.
Right.
A lot of these are more sort of ostensibly upscale vendor shows. Sean knows just
meant for like businesses
Yeah,
to show up,
which also
and,
means you need to have
requires
a
insurance and things like that.
sometimes even proof of like an LLC. I won't say who,
Right,
but
right.
one of the fairly close by town farmers markets I tried to get into about 4 years ago. I shit you not, dude. They sent me more paperwork than I have received for some job applications.
I believe it. Totally believe it.
Weirdly enough, in recent years, I think the insurance side of things, at least locally, has relaxed a little insofar as they you can pay like a few extra bucks with your booth fee and get like a rider for the day rather than having to
Oh, okay.
buy not that it was a massive amount for the coverage, but what they won't tell you is without like some sort of proper business credentials, you can still pretty easily get sued if that's what the other party's really trying to do, rather than just
Sure.
get the insurance payout, which is what most of them are doing most of the time. But regardless of all that, not a lawyer, not legal advice, consult a proper professional doing real business things. Regardless, but insurance alone can be a few $100 easy if you're netting $20 a show. And buying,
Right, that could be
to say
rough.
nothing
Yeah,
of various
100%.
supplies you might be buying just to set up at the show. Like we get some use, for the very occasional summer, family powwow out of my, my Easy Up, but it was mostly my Harbor Freight, pop-up tent, but it was mostly for those.
Right.
Same
Yeah,
with
no,
my
I mean,
other folding
there's other
table.
expenses
Yeah.
vis-a-vis like
So
Etsy or something like that, which is charging you on
they
top of
take
your
their
product
10%,
rather
your
than
cost of shipping.
yeah,
Yeah.
super flat fee.
Um, so yeah, by all means, try one out at some point and do it there. Sorry, there's a bit of a chat delay. What does do you know what Sean might have been responding to when he says seriously? Maybe that's why it's not that big
Sure.
these days. Oh,
Yeah.
probably just the all the credentials I rattled off that are required by a lot of these events. I think the chat timestamp is about where when I was talking about that. It's tough to see with our slight delay on the stream itself. Um, but yeah, so do what you will with that. Okay, I've had a good time at a few. I've done quite well at a few. There's a lot where I haven't. Taking us into item 3. Reading. I've heard of it. Have you?
I think I've occasionally done it.
I think I've watched a YouTube video about how to do it, yeah.
Yeah.
So, blacksmithing has detonated in interest in the past decade or so. There's some debate as to, well, this past decade or so was absolutely, in part, a result of, oh, yeah. A result of, funny enough, Sean, locally it's one of the ones that is pretty big, and that was always the funniest part to me. And again, we're not disparaging any event or the proprietors thereof. I have nothing but respect for folks who are able to run a more exclusive event and do well doing so. Full send. But it was still hilarious to receive that email with something like 8 or 9 attached PDFs. Regardless, so blacksmithing has definitely gained a larger following, and more interest has been what's the word I'm looking for? There's been more interest in it in recent years, the past 10 or so especially. A lot of
No
people
doubt.
attribute that to Forged in Fire on History Channel.
Oh yeah.
R.I.P.
Makes sense.
But some have actually, and there is some pretty marked evidence when you look at like the spike in membership on some of the prominent Facebook groups and activity on some of the other forums and things of that sort. Without going on a whole tangent here, Thack Ironworks, Rob Martin, just over across the border from us, does some really high-end sculptural work. I actually first discovered him when he did a fabricated Witcher, like the Witcher wolf pendant. He did
Oh yeah,
one of those
yeah.
about the size of a football helmet to decorate his editing PC
Holy
case.
shit.
Yeah, and he's like a properly trained sculptor. Principally, he does a lot of like sculptural work,
Gotcha.
and his whole first video of this little 3-video playlist, maybe I'll put it in the description, was a clay mock-up of this piece, which he then fabricated out of sheet metal. But he literally just put probably 8 to 10 hours sculpting this out of clay just to get an idea of like the sense of scale. I'm like, Jesus.
Sure.
But anyway, he has a really good
prototyping.
He has an old minus the rapidity, but he
Yeah, right.
has an old video, just some early footage of one of his classes in his shop, because he still does a lot of that as well. And he was just giving a brief history of blacksmithing, and he was talking about how interest in it dropped off around about a little ways after the 20s, when it stopped being like a proper full-time profession quite as much, and different people within it moved on to become mechanics and innumerable other professions. Modern machinists, metalworkers, fabricators, whatever. And he actually says, yes, there is some evidence and some, evidence to back up the idea that the past 10, 15 years or so have seen, a good spike in interest in the craft. But it is actually you could argue it goes all the way back to about the 60s, specifically the hippie movement, which is when homesteading became so fashionable again.
Sure.
And among other different, self-sustaining skills, there was a little bit of a bump in interest from there, and as far back as then in blacksmithing, and that kind of fell off again in around about the 90s. There were, for some perspective, I have a book, Alex Bieler, The Art of Blacksmithing, kind of a very definitive book as we get into talking about various prominent literature about the craft. It was, I think it was originally written in the 70s, but I have a later edition that was like, edited with a foreword from, updated around about 1995. The author specifically states that in 1995 he was aware of no American anvil manufacturers. You do not even have to go 12 posts in any given blacksmithing related Facebook group before you find the proprietor of an American anvil manufacturer posting
Right.
about their
These
products
days. Yeah,
nowadays.
yeah, yeah.
It really
No, that makes
is
sense.
incredible. Obviously, that's in part a direct result of because they don't make things like they used to anymore, and that's definitely not reflective of the fact that they make so many things objectively better now. Well, the marketplace's finest started asking so damn much for anvils that looked like they had been through the Battle of the Somme. It became practical to manufacture them again.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, fair
and
enough.
and
Yeah,
I joke, but I mean it was obviously in line with the resurgence and interest in the craft. We literally, it's a very boutique, specialized and small scale industry, but in a sense, an aspect of American industry was resurrected as a result of all this. We now
yeah. No,
have no small amount
doesn't
of
take much.
American manufacturers making these things again out of objectively better cast steel. Holland Anvil is but one example. I own multiple other tools that they make. My swage blocks, that cone mandrel thing is all ductile iron that that they produce. And maybe at some point I'll snag one of their anvils. We'll have that conversation after the power hammer's paid for. We're just crossed the halfway mark because I moved some money from checkings to savings and decided that not because the business is doing so well.
That works. Yeah.
Yeah, it's how it works in real business, right? So, getting into the topic at hand properly, books are great. So this craft we went on a long tangent, but what I was mainly getting at is that yes, there's this massive resurgence in interest. There's a lot more interest in the craft than there used to be. It's still amazing as soon as you really want to get into a particular topic more complex than tapering out a piece of rebar to make a little curly Q hook. That information online can be quite sparse. You have to run some searches on various forums for various keywords. Those search results don't always spit something back out that makes enough sense. God help you if you go and ask an AI about anything particularly complex about this work.
Yeah, you got about a 50-50 shot on actually getting something that's
So
even remotely relevant there.
yeah, and that leaves reputable literature on the subject, written by people who can actually be accosted via email and snail mail, which we don't advocate, of course, if they publish something that's horseshit. Therefore, it doesn't happen very much. So, if you want to get good, get better at even specifically the business side of this work, right? It helps to always be learning and bettering yourself at the work itself. And reading some great books on the subject is a really great, often very economical, very affordable, and intuitive approach to doing that. I have a small list prepared here. Actually, Sean, who's helping us moderate the chat tonight, has most of my copies of all of these on loan right now. I'd be curious if he's gotten into very many of them and what his reviews are. First and foremost is The Backyard Blacksmith by Lorelei Sims. This is a very cheap, very readily available one, jammed with great illustrations. It's a delightful hardcover, and it's an overall really good starting point. Even intermediate and experienced smiths will probably find some interesting information there. To the best of my knowledge, it's one of the only books, I think the only source of information on the craft I've ever consumed that talks about how as much as certain smiths want to pretend they're a character out of a video game and use their one hammer as much as possible, unless they're maybe except for like a shitty hammer that they use to hammer on chisels, or like a sledge for heavier work. In this book, Lorelei, the author, Sims, actually talks about how it doesn't hurt to switch hammers, specifically depending on where you're at in your your work shift, your work session. So if you're getting a little winded, you can drop down to a lighter one for a little while. You don't feel like once you sort of get your energy back, as it were, if it ever comes back, because that happens a little more slowly when it's 97 degrees in the forge. But at that point, you can switch back to your heavy one, get a little more work done faster if your technique is on point, and that's a whole other conversation we won't get quite specifically into tonight. So, am I tripping balls, or is there no timestamp on the stream itself?
No, there isn't. And the
Started,
best way to
well,
do
no, but
that.
it says within a minute. Started
Yeah.
streaming 34 minutes ago. I digress.
Okay. There
So
you
yeah, another great book, or that is a great book. Another one is The Home Blacksmith by Ryan Ridgway. Ridgway, excuse me. I think that got that for Christmas a few years ago. Another one, great photos, great information. The Smithy's Craft and Tools by Otto Schmierler. This is another one available over at Blue Moon Press. It's a little more particular. You can't necessarily Amazon it in all the time. I think it was for sale on there for a while. Maybe used copies from time to time. It's an $80-something book. I would say barely 100 pages, but definitely worth your time. Tom, this was that one I had out one of our last gaming sessions with all the delight because it was written however many decades ago by this German guy. It's actually a trilingual book. Every paragraph is in English, German, and French, or Dutch. No, English, German, French. And there's a few photos of like a few specific things earlier on, but whenever it was written,
Yeah, a lot of
the
it's like
author
illustrations,
the
right?
author recognized that the photography available to him or the cameras available to him were not necessarily up to snuff for photographing steel, hot steel at least, which is a big pain in the ass a lot of the time. So a lot of his tooling diagrams, a lot of his finials, this book is jam packed with incredible, mostly watercolor paintings of, again, all his different tools, all kinds of different finials or end designs of leaves and scrolls, and some stuff I have seen literally nowhere else. So I cannot recommend that one enough if you are remotely serious about pursuing this work. I feel like it would do a lot more for you earlier on or most other times in your career than a random $80 of tools you may or may not need, unless it's a more essential resupply. And so that's a few of them, and there are. Oh, just reading Sean's message. And there's plenty more out there as well. So by all means, explore on your own time and maybe start with one of these and go from there. But books are
Yeah, I think
really
kind of an important
where
note
it's at.
too is that books. I mean, like in terms of getting into, call it a hobby, call it a business, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
In terms of getting into a new skill like that, a book or books can be a really good starting point. Simply
100%.
because to sort of liken it to learning from like a teacher, for example. I mean, trying to find anything on the internet is a bit like walking into a gymnasium full of people and trying to figure out who is, all trying to give you advice and trying to figure out who's giving you good advice, who's giving you dog shit advice, whatever. Versus a book is more like a one-on-one conversation. I mean, they might not necessarily be 100% right about everything, but you're certainly at least getting their take on a particular topic or a particular skill set, and you're getting that take without a bunch of background noise and other bullshit that's going on, sort of unadulterated, so to speak. For whatever that, again, not everybody's necessarily right all the time, but if you can read a couple of books or read multiple books, get a few different perspectives,
Absolutely.
that should at least give you a good baseline for figuring out what on the internet is then subsequently bullshit or good advice
it absolutely
or a
will.
cool new idea, etc.
And
Gives you context.
100%. And it drives the point home that this is a line of work where there is more than one valid approach to so many problems. And when you are exposing yourself to as much of that information as possible, you can figure out what works best for you or works best in the context of a particular project, situation, whatever. In-person classes, as you alluded to a moment ago, I think kind of inadvertently, but still, are another, arguably the other principal means of, again, learning how to get underway with this. You've taken some like welding classes and other things, and can speak from that perspective.
Not to say that's for everybody. Some people don't necessarily learn any better in a live classroom setting than others, but
or are within 3 or 4 hours of a venue that has them.
Too, of course. Of course.
I think a lot more people don't necessarily look as hard as they should, and realistically are closer than that to a lot of them. Your local community college, for all anyone knows, might have welding classes, all but certainly.
Yeah. 100%.
Sometimes also like blacksmithing and other things too. Sometimes there's these little private schools like the one I hang out at, Rochester Arc and Flame Center, from time to time, who do all kinds of everything from jewelry making to coppersmithing to blacksmithing to welding. They're a literal welding school to innumerable other things. But yes, and no, Sean makes
figuring out your learning style is important too.
Absolutely. And so classes are another great tool for that. But I said recognizing that people don't necessarily have the time to drive a few hours to one or find one, or in fact are particularly close to one at all, or necessarily have the couple $100s that even some of the cheaper ones are, um, realistically might be able to more easily justify a $12 book. So I think the conversation should still start there, but also, the classes thing is, bears keeping in mind. Sean makes a good point that this is so absolutely. Oh, okay, that's them too, Sean. This place is technically, and I think I've told you before, technically an Airgas in front. So Han is, an Airgas competitor, same difference. But yeah, there's no shortage of welding classes, more so. But if you're not like truly in the middle of nowhere, and potentially even in those cases, you might be able to find some kind of, if not a proper class. The ABANA, the Artist Blacksmith Association of North America, have chapters in every state in the U.S. I think plenty all over Canada, possibly even a few in Mexico. I don't freaking know. And those statewide chapters have regional ones, and they usually conduct. It's whatever the chapter wants to do, but most that I have heard of adhere to the general format of a monthly meeting. That can be at in a more formal setting, like a community college's welding area, welding shop, or literally some local blacksmith's private shop. It's all a matter of how they like to run what. So short story long, there probably is an opportunity to at least see like a demonstration, if not a proper hammer in, they usually call it, if not a proper full-on class, to pick other blacksmiths' brains and see how this all really works in the flesh, because it really is ultimately something you have to at least learn past a certain point by doing.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's about it when it comes to that item. Books and classes are great. Moving on. So, item 4, probably my favorite and a decently long one, but nevertheless, is putting the word out. So telling everyone in your relative local orbit about that you're getting into blacksmithing, or you're into blacksmithing already, whatever. I mean, it's not a matter of the context being you're hitting anyone up for material or trying to sell them finished work, though you would be surprised how receptive many people usually are to both of those things. But it doesn't have to have that used car salesman vibe. Just organically talk to whoever you normally talk to, however you normally talk to them, and talk about some projects you might have going, and just see what they think. Maybe they just find it cool, brightens their day a little bit. Tremendous. Share random projects, obviously with full credit and just in private conversation, or if you're a member of like smaller local groups or those of particular friend groups, discords, whatever. Share cool stuff other people make. You find on the internet. Someone literally, like Tom approached me with 2 years ago with the vest hangers. We'll finally get into Tom. You never know who might be in the market for what. As far as, well, I'll just tell our exact story, as I more or less already did. I think I just found this really cool example of a obnoxiously like Baroque, Art Deco, whatever art style you prefer to push it to compare it to, just a real high-end coat hanger. And then I think the upward flared ends reminded you of the hook ends.
I was like, hey, you know what that looks like?
On that plastic hanger we might as well finally explain this product. So both being in the airsoft space,
but they're more like, I think they're really more intended for like ops and like people that would wear body armor like on the reg, like would like want it up in their closet kind of thing.
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously, big side thing there for airsofters. So also I happen to have a lot of fake body armor and things like that they would need to be hanging up.
But realistically, anything with straps they could be hung from. So I'm sure,
exactly.
I've only sold a few of these, and none of my customers have ever gotten too specific. But I could see various anglers making some use of these things. They're just a heavy duty coat hanger where the ends flare upwards and off into hooks. So as I said, anything with a strap cannot fall or slide off. Instead of downwards,
as hangers generally do.
Or having no hook at all, or just a round end and then a bridge, and then a bar of well, everyone knows what a coat hanger looks like.
Yes, they do.
So, short story long, something with straps or loops can be hung from them and not slide right off. That's all there is to it. And again, they're made of quarter-inch round bar, so they're definitely up to task as well. Unlike those, what were those plastic ones you showed me that Prime shipped, but still like over $12 a piece. And you said you snapped multiple of them, but
Yeah,
know people who have.
at the cheapest. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean,
Um,
or like you look at the weight limits of them, and you're like, well, that wouldn't even support a
be
vest, like if
counterintuitive,
it had
totally
actual
counterintuitive to
weights
the
in it,
intended use.
or
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
or pouches or whatever. Yeah,
right. Yeah, especially if you get into the real steel stuff, or as you said, even just like an exercise weight vest, if it's under
fair
or
point.
above
Yeah,
whatever the
100%.
threshold is, regardless. Um, so yeah, you never know who might be, on one side of things, who might have just finished a remodel and have a bunch of old random metal in their back room they just want gone that you might be able to use. You never know who might, be in the middle of some particular project or just want some particular product to solve some particular problem that you showing them something else might inspire, and then they'll want to commission you for that job. Um, Again, it's not about making money as such, but it usually ends that way, and people are very happy to pay you for that kind of quality product. And that's how a lot of those conversations at the smaller level can begin. You don't necessarily have to go to vendor shows or compete with everybody and their brother else on Etsy or local marketplace groups to, start making a few bucks doing this stuff. So, item 4B, as it were. This is a three-faceted topic. Um, in short, another good reason to tell everybody about what you're up to is that you never know who in your relative orbit has had it up to their eyeballs with the world's bullshit and might be interested in coming and helping out in the shop and just making some cool stuff or getting out of the house, whatever. And yeah, whatever their motivation or reason for doing so, it never hurts to have another pair of hands in the shop, whatever you're working on for the most part. This segues delightfully into one of my favorite rants as far as so I'm not like extensively well read on every aspect of blacksmithing history, so please don't go correcting me in the chat if you've read some random book where this doesn't really appear to be the reality. But the consensus based on what I've listened to, generally folks like, I forget which of them left, but at the time it was Sam and Alex who run the Forgecast, a couple real talented bladesmiths out of Australia. Some other books, some other forum posts that definitely cite some other books. I can't remember offhand for sure, but the historical evidence pretty overwhelmingly indicates that the idea of like a one-man blacksmith shop, even in many smaller towns, was actually quite rare. The Industrial Revolution might not have happened until the middle of the 19th century, but that's not to say that assembly lining and specialization and doing sometimes at an incredible scale, very high level production work wasn't a thing. One great example I had anecdotally heard about was like, because people think blacksmiths made just literally everything, even hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So I read someone was talking about one case where one blacksmith was literally a master nail maker. So he did
There you go.
just exceedingly decorative high end nails for presumably churches and cathedrals and innumerable other things that had the budget to want the Mercedes of nails.
Yeah, it's really
He
funny how
wasn't
that
banging out
that's,
breastplates
when you think about like
in the evenings.
right, exactly, or
Yeah.
like yeah, but you're not going to the same guy to get like breastplates and swords and all the
Yeah.
shit that name pick your fantasy trope or
Right.
whatever like that's gonna be. I mean that should be obvious to anybody that puts even a modicum of thought into it, just based on like modern careers, because I mean like everybody specializes.
Absolutely.
Pretty as a general rule, the longer you're in a particular career and the more expertise you generate in a particular area, the more you tend to focus down on a particular facet of that.
Yeah.
Of that skill set.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
And that's I'm sure there were less more remote, more rural areas. The American frontier in the 15, 16, 1700s, things were done a lot differently than they were in Europe at the very same time. So there are caveats. But broadly speaking, yes, there really wasn't, I think it's not that we want to disparage anybody or talk treat them negatively because of their literal rather than the derogatory sense of ignorance. But I mean, because they're not necessarily to blame, um, as much as when they play an RPG. This is really aging myself, but regardless, they play an RPG like Diablo, where they go see blacksmith Charcy wearing nothing but her jackboots and her apron in the starting town, selling the blacksmith selling everything from armor to 3 different types of blunt weapons to 4 different types of sharp weapons to trinkets to shields to
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Like that really was not the reality.
No.
When you look at even just look from the perspective of the extraordinarily specialized tooling to do any one of those things, I just prattled off. The idea that a hammer, a blacksmith could get it done, get an incredible amount of things done passively with the time and the material, with hammer and anvil and forge, maybe 1 or 2 more portable, particular general purpose tools. But it was not long before say armor smiths had very specific. It's honestly incredible to read about how many different types of anvils catered to very specific industries there are. The most prevalent example nowadays is probably like a farrier's anvil, which have a couple of little like protrusions off to the sides for bending horseshoes to a particular radius, and they have a little bit of a shoulder or a pretty wide radius on like the back end opposite the horn, again just to true up like the main portion of the horseshoe, little down steps to do the little tabs, like shit like that. There were anvils for the oil industry. There were anvils for wagon makers, whatever you care to name.
There was
even
a
a tool like
specific
that.
anvil,
They did
and
not
sort of
all.
a specialist for it.
They did not all look like the Looney Tunes, character dropping on another character's head, London pattern anvil.
Right.
That all the work was done. You could get by with one of those, but yeah. And finally, for the third sort of facet of this particular topic is, as we've kind of already discussed, you never know who's in the market for what and what might come to mind when they're shown a cool piece for its own sake, whomever made it. And then this is just rehashing the coat hanger story we already mostly told. So yeah, definitely put the word out. Friends, family, coworkers, friends at the vape shop. I don't care, and just let everyone know that this is a thing that you are looking to do or that you already do, and go from there. Sean's got the right idea. No need for a tool. Make it invent it. Yes, and that's what operative words, Sean. They made or invented the tools. They didn't sit there like assholes and try to figure out, okay, how do I do this with my cross-peen hammer and my beat-up old anvil that the horns snapped off of last year?
Yeah.
Blacksmiths were actually extraordinarily forward-thinking people at the time, because it was hard, shitty, lethal work that they, were the first ones to automate and do build tooling to do it bigger, faster, more efficiently. As we've talked about in last stream, I've talked about with you guys privately. Rudimentary, water-powered, obviously, power hammers go back to ancient China. So what's obviously always funny to me are people who understandably want to do things in a more traditional way, and I just, all due respect to them, I don't think they really get what that means at all, because obviously I have nothing but respect for doing things the traditional way as they are under the impression it's defined, but in a sense that ended 2,400 years ago.
Right.
They weren't, for the sake of doing it the old way, the olden way, tapering down a piece of 2-inch bar stock for something on a ship with a 2-pound hand hammer.
It depends on what you're in this whole thing for. Because like you said, certain people just want to do it a certain way because it's fun versus if
Okay,
you're
yeah,
in this as a business enterprise,
right.
yeah, fair enough.
Or even just to, from the perspective of learning as much as effectively as possible and keeping your waste of time to a minimum. If you're just having fun, you're just having fun, being safe, full send from me. But yeah, I've heard some pretty successful arguments that even if you want to be a traditional Viking blacksmith eventually, it's not stupid or cheating to get a gas forge to be able to heat 10 pieces at a time and bang out 10 J hooks in 20 minutes rather than dick around improperly managing a charcoal fire for 3 hours to do half that amount of work and then not learn as much about how metal moves and reacts and therefore
Right.
not become an MLG Viking blacksmith quite as quickly. But to each their own. As whatever, if this is mostly something to do to hide from the family in the garage, that's another animal entirely. I'd still loudly argue there's generally a more specific, if you're specifically in this to learn as much as you can, um, a most efficient, most optimal approach to that, regardless. Into the next item here, in bold, massive letters, it is simply, don't be cheap. Sometimes buying new stock is anything but cost prohibitive. Metals Depot is a great U.S. steel supplier site, steel supply site. That's been my baseline most of the time for sort of where online steel pricing in the U.S. is at any given time. And while it's gotten worse lately, I'm still amazed at what they'll throw, especially once you start ordering in bulk. And this goes for plenty of other suppliers as well, including your local steel places. Always feel free to give them a call. Some of them have websites. Most of them don't. But as far as Metals Depot goes, I'm amazed at what they'll throw in a FedEx truck for $25. You know what I'm saying? It seems a little silly when you're ordering 1 or 2 sticks of something on the longer side, even like 4-footers. But I actually just whipped up a cart of some rebar just to see if I where I'm at with that, if I have to start ordering material for doing these ferns. 25 pieces of 4-footers of 3/8 rebar was actually significantly less in shipping than 1.
I
So,
believe it. Yeah, I mean, like, don't some of these places? I feel like maybe it's not Metals Depot, but
more so the
you can even
shipping
save a little bit
couriers.
more than that. Yeah, or they're combining orders because it's like I've had
Yeah.
it where
Oh,
you can
absolutely.
save massively by if you're willing to, drive 20 minutes to go to their warehouse in the middle of the city or whatever.
Oh,
Um,
all day.
you
Yeah.
can save massively on,
At-
picking up like ship to store kind of thing is usually preposterously inexpensive.
yes. Yes.
Given the type of crap that you're shipping.
And that's
So
a
yeah,
conversation to call one of these places up to and have. Maybe they can, in many cases, they can cut something down. Years ago, they used to be a lot more particular when it came to like a minimum order quantity,
yeah.
or sometimes even requiring having like charge accounts. I've heard a lot of that has stopped. In fact, of probably 4 or 5 major steel places in this neck of the woods, approximately, I've heard of one, and it is now close to 3-year-old information that they actually wanted a minimum order quantity.
Yeah, fair enough. And nobody uses fucking charge accounts anymore because
Yeah.
it's the year of our Lord 2025. And even if you're working at a major full-size defense prime, there's still credit cards floating around as purchase cards. So, I mean,
Right.
a P card's the same exact thing as a normal person's credit card. So,
Yeah.
if they take P cards or if they deal with a business, pretty much a certainty they can deal with a credit card.
Absolutely. Yep. And no, and piggybacking off of orders is a real thing too. If you know literally anyone with any kind of business that might even every few years put in an order for steel for any kind of project, or contractors working for them doing so, it's worth opening up that line of dialogue and seeing who can do what for you. For all you know, they might have $100-something credit sitting that they've had nothing to do with hitherto. So yeah, ordering new clean steel is actually, in my view, a pretty underrated means of starting to learn how metal moves and getting into the craft. That can absolutely, you'll pay a bit of a premium, but that can absolutely involve just getting a few sticks of whatever at your local hardware store. The mom and pops, in my experience, generally have a little more experience, a little more stock, and a little more different stock sizes than like your Home Depots and stuff. At least considering that a lot of what the bigger box stores have is galvanized, so you would need to
Right.
remove that galvanization, that zinc plating. Zinc plating is technically something different, but that treatment somehow, because that is not good to be breathing in. You should have a respirator rated for that on, in my opinion, anywhere near a gas forge, regardless, or in your smithy, your forge working, because even speaking outside of the context of the biases of my dust allergy, I mean, these places are the idea that, oh, if your gas forge's liner is immaculately maintained and you're not burning off freaking galvanizing, that there's nothing else problematic you could possibly be breathing in a freaking forge, and it's so patently absurd to hear the conversation framed this way in some circles. But regardless, um, as far as procuring steel goes, you'll want to get just regular old mild steel, some couple sizes of round bar, square bar, maybe one or two of flat, and just make sure it's not stainless. There's no need to be working with stainless or galvanized or otherwise plated or coated with any sort of rust preventative of that nature. Those will be the safest to work with, and as they are unstressed, freshly made new stock, rather than something artisanally liberated from a local junkyard that turns out to have a crack going all the way down it that you don't see until you try to make something out of that particular piece. They're going to be the least belligerent pieces of steel to work with. So yeah, you're paying for them. You're paying a premium sometimes, but in a roundabout way, they're safer. I'm sure you can speak to that, Tom.
100%.
Because you're not dealing with as much bullshit from them.
Well, plus, I mean, beyond the safety aspect of it, I mean, there's also the opportunity cost of dealing with all the bullshit that you just mentioned.
Yeah. Being
I mean,
cheap can absolutely be
depending on how
expensive.
you value your time,
Yep.
I mean, that is a non-negligible amount of costs that you have to add on to any, rusty shit that you have floating around out back versus just getting something that's going to work as soon as you pull it out of the shipping tube.
Yeah. And but no, back to the safety thing. I have kind of an anecdotal example of being cheap is liable to become very expensive, and this was entirely my fault. But one thing about reclaimed stock is, especially with regard to welding things up out of it, every bit as much as forging. I'll get to that in a moment. But focusing on stock for welding purposes right now is that it needs to be processed, unless you're stick welding. But even in a lot of those cases, stick doesn't care quite as much about rust and other scuzz on the outside of a workpiece, but you still want to prep your work. And
absolutely.
yeah, so I was sure enough, actually, funny enough, Tom, welding up the current iteration of the bending jig for the vest hangers. And yeah, there was a piece of scale that was chunkier than I thought it was, but another little clean spot of steel next to it on welding a couple pieces together that I just either just wire brushed or didn't quite prep as much as I realistically could have, because it was all reclaimed stock. I had a nice little arc flash that I'm lucky not to have any serious eye injury because my welding hood was up at the time. But yeah, this being cheap can be very expensive, including from a health and safety standpoint. So be mindful out there. The reclaimed steel has its place. If you want to heat up a few pieces of rebar and make somebody a nice hook, full send. But there's a lot of cases for biting the bullet and buying some new steel too. Up to and including that proper mild steel can be a lot softer than shit like rebar, which is made from whatever reclaimed stock from wherever. As far as mild steel, which is one of a number of particular alloys, just like a particular tool steel or some other whatever. And even forging,
unless you happen to have a full assay lab in your in your forge shop there in your basement, you also might not know what the hell you're actually working with in terms of, is it mild? Has it been hardened inadvertently? Has it, has something happened to it in some other chemical fashion that's resulted in it, or going to result in it not working the way you expect it to? Things like that.
Will we not notice that until we quench it and realize, oh, this is actually, this 2-inch length of rebar is probably some 1920s sausage factory floor sweepings equivalent of steel, and kind of sort of hardens to the point of a prominent tool steel that you might make an axe or a blade out of, and because it's being water crunched, it just fractures and comes apart next heat. There's a lot of unknowns with certain when we're using reclaimed steel in certain applications. And just back to the wrapping up the safety side of things, so we talked about welding kerfuffles, but even forging as well. I've noticed certain older stock. I actually have 2 or 3 burns on my left arm, healing now, as a result of so gas forges in and of themselves do this worse than solid fuel forges. That is, they cause the material the steel to scale So just like a burn, blisters, and then that skin falls off. Metal more or less does that for those who are a little more uninitiated. Even though this is a more sort of intermediate blacksmithing show. There's if you watch pretty much any forging video, you'll see crap coming off of the hot piece of stock. That's what's called scale. So a very thin layer of the exterior of the workpiece is coming off as that material cools and shrinks. The skin of the metal. That's all that matters. Upcycled or reclaimed steel of various flavors can actually do that more and break down faster, which creates potentially moderately high velocity, hotter shrapnel that can hit your hands and arms and other exposed areas. I've had one infiltrate my goggles before, twice,
Have fun.
and create kerfuffles, which you don't want. So, yeah, buy a couple. Go without. No one's asking you to order in a pallet of whatever from whatever metal supplier, but go without the profound life-changing experience that is Taco Bell on the way home tomorrow, and buy a few sticks of metal from Home Depot or your local hardware store or whatever, and compare and contrast it to whatever garbage you're given for free next. And if nothing else, inform yourself on what that material difference is like to work with. Easy as. That about takes care of that. So we've got a decent little amount of viewers, but Sean's the only one sounding off in the chat. We've done a little over an hour now. We can keep going. We can start taking some Q&A. Oh, we got a 5th viewer. High rolling, brothers. Yeah, so I will probably get back into the larger conversation in a little bit, but I'm definitely opening up the floor to Q&A at this point. We'll just, as I said, keep the conversation going until those questions start rolling in, if they ever do.
If folks have questions that are watching this sort of like in post, like once it's just sort of up, is
Comment
there a
away.
normal comment section that pops up? Okay, yeah, there
Yeah,
is. So,
100%.
and
It's,
I mean, I would say that we,
oh yeah, there's
check
no
those
reason
and
to
probably read up on those next time you do a stream. And
yeah,
maybe
actually,
get some of
even
those answers.
moving forward, if it's easiest or preferable for anybody, feel free to just reach out to the business email. We'll do like a fan mail segment. Lighthammerforge
Oh,
at
yeah, it's not a bad idea.
gmail.com. So once again, lighthammerforge at gmail.com. I, in my infinite wisdom, did not put it in the description, but it's literally the business name at gmail.com. So where was I going with that? What were we talking about immediately previous?
Really just questions.
Yep, that, and I guess we'll just keep it going. Okay, I thought there was something else. Regardless,
really sort of ended the fresh,
yeah.
the fresh stuff.
You know what the only other thing was expanding our empire, as it were. So, I'm a huge proponent, just because of the result of very many different people helping me out in various ways in this regard. Tom and Sean hanging out with us tonight are included. So the knowledge dissemination is always free. We're very firm proponents of that here. That said, if you are sitting there like, wow, this has become so insightful, or I want to check out, I've checked out some of your work and I think it's awesome. I don't necessarily want to buy anything yet, but like, okay, how do I give you money? And we're still getting like something a little more conventional set up in that regard. But for now, just down in the description is an Etsy link to the STL for the Lighthammer Forge badge. So if you have a 3D printer yourself, you can bang that out. There's a nice little hole on the back for a magnet. You can, stick a magnet in. Harbor Freight has a great little pack of 10 little discs. You can order them from a specialty supplier or innumerable other places. Stick it on the fridge. Stick it on your back of your car, whatever. Have someone, obviously grant my full permission for someone to print it out on your behalf if you would like to send them that file after purchasing. If you couldn't give the slightest shit about any of that, it is a de facto way to send us a $5 donation. So again, that is the topmost Etsy link. I said that's not, Etsy isn't really somewhere you can, unlike some other places, voluntarily pay more, nor can you actually add multiple of a singular digital item to
like
a cart.
Tip or whatever, yeah.
Well, we also can't add you can only buy one iteration of one digital item at a time, I think, for life for your account. So like you can't buy 20 of this STL to give me $100. So
Okay.
in the meantime, again, the second link takes you to my STL file section of my shop. So there's some stuff in there of all different price points. If you really feel compelled to freaking spend more, you can do it that way for now. But nothing is expected. As I said, our profound insights are always free. This is just something we like doing. That said, we've got some fun projects going, so your money will be earmarked and well spent towards a lot of different goofy things that of a non-commercial, um, excuse me, variety, art for art's sake sort of project we will be working on. So that's
Definitely
our
not booze.
once in a while, booze,
Maybe
but
maybe booze.
mostly maybe booze while we work on our Nerf las cannon. Oh, I
Again,
spilled the
it's
beans,
very
didn't
important to the process.
I? And yes, indeed, as Sean points out, some people simply haven't had to sit through the OSHA safety course. That was posted right around I told my Arc Flash story. Um, well, I guess we could. I could actually start playing some Mechanicus, but I kind of just want to vibe. I guess we could do sort of a test run of either. We could get into more of the topic at hand, but we could do a test run of what will be our intro moving forward when I have guests or even when I don't. And that is just
Oh yeah.
the bullet point list on the beginning of the Google Docs. So what are you working on right now, Tom? Any particular interesting projects you're really fired up about? Anything that potentially relates to this bullshit? Though it doesn't have to. Uh, what
It's
do you got going on?
specifically correlate to bullshit like this. I mean, I guess in a sense, yeah, I mean, maybe as like a general making
Broad
thing, it
parallel,
sort of
yeah.
does. Infrastructure projects are kind of the big thing on my list right now. Sort of rejiggering my shop to better suit my needs as I sort of move forward with just like my general making slash generalist stuff. The way you set your shop up, at least to me, has always been kind of important. I'm big on
Oh
like
yeah,
organization and making sure everything has a place and that it's easy to access. So sort of redesigning everything in there to better accommodate where I'm at now. That's been taking up a lot of my time. But project-wise, yeah, I got a couple things in the pipeline that I'm sort of working on. I had mentioned at the beginning of the show we had built mech suits at one point, so that's sort of been my like
we
a big sort of project looming in the background that I've wanted to work on.
boss. They would probably have
I'm
to dig pretty deep. But are any photos of those still on the Explosive Enterprises Facebook page?
yeah, I think
Let's find out.
technically one of them, one or both of them, are still on the still the cover photo actually, to my recollection.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, the later
we
iterations,
don't
but
yeah
yes.
we don't put up a ton of like photos on there either, so it would not take you too long to actually dig through and find those. Um,
Right, run
but
a
yeah, no,
keyword
that's sort
search.
of something that I'm maybe looking to move forward a little bit more with, and then also sort of getting into
Oh, dude,
some
not to
more
interrupt, but I
electric
just ran
stuff.
a keyword search through on the page of the word suit.
Yep.
Everything comes
Uh,
right back up from
oh, well,
2017,
there you go.
2018. Yeah,
Yep.
they're all here.
So that's yeah, it's probably a pretty easy way to access it.
So if anyone's looking for
Um,
some of them Iron Harvest vibes, feel free to cruise over to the Explosive Enterprises
there you go.
Facebook page.
And to
Uh,
sort of connect with that, I'm getting a little bit more into coding, Arduino, like general electronics and controls,
yes,
automation, stuff like that. So I got a couple projects that I'm thinking about getting going that are associated with that. Some airsoft, again, coming back to those airsoft explosives, things like that. Some like remote landmine type things. Yeah, a bunch of different stuff working on that could sort of come up there, and then
later,
whatever
Sean.
sort of projects pop out of that sort of strike my fancy as I get a little bit more skilled with it. So yeah.
Yeah, past probably a bit of a year or so at this point, the electronic stuff has been a bigger focus vis-a-vis the months and years before. So I know you've been wanting to take that
Mhm.
further with your current workbench setup, and
Yeah, absolutely. I just need like a big project to sort of dive into it with,
yeah,
and yeah,
uh,
eventually getting to that is going to be the thing.
and yeah, no, you mentioned shop. Hey, our good friend Phil Campbell is here this fine evening. It in fact is live, hence why it says so. Um, we are doing it live, as it were, and I'm banned. So
F it.
I But yeah, back to just tying at least to sort of a vague parallel for the sake of it to blacksmithing. Rest assured, every book I rattled off before and plenty more authored on the subject are absolutely very adamant about shop setup. Certain most of them adhere to a triangular um, disposition or layout between your
Interesting.
anvil, your vise, and your forge. You basically want to be able to get from
Okay.
any one to any other quite quickly. Principally the forge to either the vise or the anvil
Yeah,
without
I mean,
tripping
for
over
me,
eight
it's more
things.
like taming my ADHD and like
Well, that too. Yeah.
once you get out of that sort of like flow state in terms of your work,
Well,
like
if you don't
everything
tame
kind
your
of just falls off the
ADHD
rails.
or get out of your flow state in a blacksmith shop, you trip over a swage block and burn your left forearm on your vise.
Yeah, well,
So,
plus, I mean, the fact your shop setup is so much more important because the metal's cooling. Like you're on a timer,
yeah,
so how your things are oriented is much more of a necessity than it is sort of like something you do just for funsies with some other types of work. That's
literally
yeah,
the
it's a
main
really
reason.
interesting
Yep.
thought. Hadn't considered to me.
Mhm. What specifically? Just that triangular pattern or just broadly
No,
speaking?
the triangular pattern, or the fact that it's fairly important how you set your shop up in terms
Yeah.
of like physical space, because you do again you are on the clock and you only have so much time to be working this stuff. So beyond
Abs-
just from a safety perspective, your overall work speed is going to be dramatically affected
Absolutely.
by how you set
To
your
say
shop up.
nothing of maybe you're set up in a bigger building than my, well, the real estate permanently consumed by some of my dad's old truck parts, still notwithstanding, and now a power hammer. So I guess I've officially graduated to becoming my own problem in that regard. But
There you go.
if you're in a building significantly larger than my sub 10 by 20 space, it becomes having to, if for no good fucking reason your anvil's 30 feet from your forge, that's going to
An issue.
hamper your
Yeah.
workflow. We are also at 7 viewers again, by the way. So if anyone wants to tell a friend or two about this bullshit,
Wayo.
we will exceed our peak. So that's fun. Um, is that anyone who is in fact out there and alive and has any questions about what we do or what we've discussed, depending on how long you've been here, please sound off in the chat. Um, but yeah, no, workshop setup can and is uh, every bit as paramount with this work as many other disciplines. Just like electronics, just like as general DIY stuff, and countless trades and other crafts of a more commercial level, on a more commercial level. That is, Um,
I know you've got some projects on the plate,
yes, what
sort
are
of
we working
rolling
on
back to what we were
here?
just talking about.
I'm spilling the beans about it all. I've alluded to some on the hobby page, Lighthammer Creations. I've posted some outright on the Lighthammer Forge, Facebook, and Instagram pages. I forget what mediums I'm on. Um, so yeah, we have three large, principal projects of a non-commercial nature going right now, and some other stuff that will eventually go up for sale as well. Right now, I am, angle grinder in hand, sometimes my own, sometimes somebody else's, viciously hogging out industrial amounts of steel for, at best, questionable reasons to make the Kovac Peacekeeper Mace from GTFO, which is a somewhat still prominent. I think it's actually been on sale for at a deep discount for quite a few days now. I keep seeing the ads because the algorithm feeds them to me from posting
Oh
about
yeah,
the game constantly. So I'm making
no doubt.
probably one of the coolest melee weapons in a sci-fi game I've seen in a hot minute. I'm actually going to swap to a screen share and show it to everybody. It's basically a segmented mace. Did you say in game they call it a bat? Assholes.
You do, yeah. That whole
But
class of weapon is called a
a
bat for
bat.
some hilarious reason,
Yes.
but yeah.
It's proportionally speaking, it's not the farthest off, but it is still pretty funny for them to call it that. I think it's called a mace elsewhere in game, regardless. Um, and you know what else is really funny? Just looking at our screenshots we took a while ago, is the radical difference in the sense of scale between it being on one guy's back versus when it's being wielded by the player character. It's like, oh wow,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
just shrunk 60%. So naturally, I adhered to the latter approximate size, and then wondered why it's going to be probably 30 pounds when finished, but it's going to make a cool meme video to obliterate a watermelon or something and get me hopefully to a million subs. and we'll go from there. Question becomes, will we see a display? I'm just figuring out how to get
I'm not sure if you're actively broadcasting. There you go. Yep,
Yep.
Let's pop it through now.
So we are looking at Le Mace. I don't think I can just highlight a particular browser tab.
You are looking, yeah, so you're actually still looking at the game on my screen here.
There's about a 10-second delay, so I'm looking at the Mace
Oh,
now.
yeah, right, though.
We should be good. And yeah, so this is the psychotic depravity that I am attempting to fabricate. And things are going fairly well. I will, we say that now, I assume? Yeah. So I can actually cruise over to my own Instagram, do this the same way. Hopefully not see anything particularly felonious initially. Just another blacksmith post.
Taking a big risk.
Oh, a big risk indeed. So, that's the first post. Yeah, so we have, as you can see, initially in the bottom leftmost post, welded up the segments out of pieces of 2-inch hex nut and some other scrap around a piece of square tubing that I was originally just going to use 2 half-by-13 hex nuts, but when you put them at opposite ends, what does that mean? They have to line up pretty much perfectly, lest the threaded rod threaded through them become a little belligerent. So I'm going to switch to coupling nuts that are the length of the segment and be done. So there's no potential for play, because the way it's going to be assembled, as we can see in this next post here. So you remember, there's still an ancient video of us twisting out that handle with the world's biggest crescent wrenches.
Oh, yeah.
So it's going to be a pineapple twist handle, because as we saw earlier, perhaps only briefly, the hilt is portrayed in game as this insanely coarse, like knurling. If tooling to do knurling that course exists, I'm sure the tooling alone, let alone the lathe or whatever the fuck kind of machine you put that on, will be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So we reinterpreted that as a pineapple
I'm sure the machine
twist.
that does the size of a fucking car. That's some huge ass knurling, yeah.
Oh, and know the best part, Dom? If you look closely at the hilt, it flares out at each end, so it's just like impossible to machine.
Yeah, no,
I guess we could.
That much more complex.
I guess we could theoretically like upset it after we, got our $10,000 piece of equipment if we're lucky to make this one piece. But so we split the difference and reinterpreted that as a nice pineapple twist for the sake of a forged element. That way we can post it on all of the forging forums and not get bitched at for it being a welding project. So as you guys can see, there's a little channel lock for a sense of scale on the right in this post for some rough idea of scale. That is a piece of half 13 thread, probably a little over a foot long. Yeah, thereabouts. So this thing is going to be massive and chunky. That said, this is where we left off with, so I got about 2 segments pretty much ground out the way I want them. We're still at it. This was right before it got real hot, so then I crawled into my basement and, busted out the Heinekens and painted some miniatures for a while. And the gas station's finest Heinekens, just like at the premiere of last episode, we talked about the gas station's finest love, Sam Adams. My buddy got a kick out of that. Regardless,
only the finest.
This is sort of a before and after, one of very few cases where I actually take and properly document a particular project the way I always should. And did I already tell you about this? We lost. We threw it at my friend's postal scale after he, let me go to town with his belt grinder to do this.
Yeah.
It lost probably about 6 ounces.
No kidding! Wow. I guess it's not that surprising looking at it.
Yeah. So this is going to be a not negligible amount of weight loss just from the finishing process, which is going to be pretty crazy. 2 or 3 pounds, maybe more. So that's where I've left off with that. I will now yoink my display capture. So yeah, that's been the main project. That's probably the longest standing project on the docket. I am now working, or also planning to get started on the Dark Tide Tactical Axe, which is going to be fun. I might actually farm out a lot of that work and then just handle the, like a real artist, just to have, my associates do the production. I'm really the idea man and the final assembly sort of guy.
You take the credit and the final product.
Right, some of the credit, right. But, really just sort of do the art for art's sake stuff. So we're, let me turn my screen capture back on and show you guys a nice picture of that. Actually, I wonder if, because remember, this is a big pain in the ass with Restream, but I wonder if Streamlabs properly recognizes the Photos app. So, not that I'm up to anything I care that anyone sees, but theoretically, I wonder if I can share just, an image open. Stand by. Let us find out. Add source. Capture a specific window. Okay. Okay. Window. Photos.exe. Stand by. It's a particular size. We'll shrink it. Let me know what you see in the next 10 to 12 seconds here, Dan.
Actually shows up here. Looks like a fat lot of nothing, just a black box.
Oh, it is just showing a black screen. I don't know why. Is the Photos app censored? That'd be fun, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Weird.
Well, we'll just do the display capture again and open up the image file. So, in a few moments, you guys will be seeing the Darktide Tactical Axe concept, and we are making one of these. It should be quite an experience here. We good, Tom?
Yeah, there we go. Just
awesome.
popped up.
So, the Tactical Axe is so it's a profile view from the side and then a view from the back. The first two here. Can you see my cursor as well or not?
Yeah, we can. It's not for some reason. I mean, you can still see you can see basically like the rightmost image and the center one, but the right or leftmost and center one, the rightmost is kind of cut off on the screen. It's like it's not centered for some
totally
reason.
On me for the positioning.
Yeah.
Think so? Probably better now.
Yeah, I gave it a few seconds for the delay, but yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, see you doing stuff. That's looking better.
Yep.
Let's see. Hang on. Still going. There we go. Yep, perfect.
All right. You'll see it. I tabbed out for a moment, so you'll see it come and go in a second. Regardless, so on the left is the profile view, and on the second from the left is the rear view of the Tactical Axe from Warhammer 40k Darktide, which we're going to make as faithful as possible a replica of, complete with the volume knob. Very important aspect of a melee weapon.
Is it going to be sharp?
Is it going to be sharp? Oh, yeah. I
nice.
Might have the same gentleman who built my power hammer do a nice heat-treated proper blade for the top, and maybe even handle, I'll see what he thinks as far as that boxy portion where the Imperial Eagle, the Aquila, is.
Yeah.
And maybe just have that fabricated and ready to go and have a... so we might have to play with the proportions a little, because my thinking so far is basing it all around the handle being a piece of 3/4 black pipe. So actual OD, probably a hair shy of an inch, maybe a hair over an inch. I forget how pipe thicknesses usually work. And I figured the easiest way to do that and assemble it without adding, because we totally could add like a set screw or something somewhere and have it look fine. But basically have a hole going all the way through the top of like that rectangular segment of the top piece, back of the blade, and set the pipe down a little bit and just weld that end shut, also joining it quite securely to the blade. Because I mean, again, we might make a meme video or two cutting something once, but this is going to be a heavy duty wall hanger, not a bushcrafting axe. So I mean, if eventually if I start chopping industrial amounts of crap with it and it it breaks, I'll address that situation then and there, and potentially weld it up a little more solid on the bottom or whatever. But for now, we're making a more.
Are you integrating 3D printed parts on that as well, or is that pretty much going to be
Yeah,
entirely made of
I'm
metal? Is that the idea?
so I have a gear that's I want to maybe try to find a taller one to do this segmented piece just under the volume knob, separating the wrapped hilt from the upper half.
Yeah, yeah.
But worst case, I might 3D print that. And I don't know how I want to interpret which parts of the pommel, so I might
What
go.
does that look like? It's like
Uh,
the rotor for a motor, maybe like the rotor for an electric
yeah,
motor,
I'm sure there's some kind of
or something. Yeah.
spline gears, different pulley parts. I've seen a lot, to be honest. Verbatim, that's another conversation. Hence why maybe I'll 3D print that too. Um, but yeah, we could absolutely make like at least the top half of the pommel metal potentially. Maybe even call up one of my machining contacts and see what they can
You
hog
certainly
out.
could.
And then from there, I'll call up one of my leatherworking buddies to wrap the hilt and just handle the final assembly up top. So there's
Cool.
actually a set screw holding at least a couple pieces together right above the volume knob, so that's kind of funny and fortuitous in terms of not having to compromise the design, but still make it reasonably sensible. And yeah, those are probably the three biggest personal projects. I'm making a few sunflowers inspired by, yeah, just look up sunflowers, man. This was from Torbjorn Oman, one of my main inspirations in blacksmithing. I've showed you some of his stuff, Tom, the Swedish guy. He,
Oh
a
yeah,
while ago, did a really cool, I'm
like a
just
fern
skim through it,
variant.
a steel sunflower um, to benefit the Ukrainian Red Cross. And I just really liked the design, so I might make a few myself for around the house and see how it goes. I've already printed out the pattern. Can you see me with the video open?
Yes.
So that's what it looks like all finished, about a foot in diameter. And he doesn't quite show it, Braden, but the way he does all the seeds is a big double beveled pointed chisel. So it's
Wow. God, that must take
like
fucking
a
forever.
chevron shape. Yeah, he, as you can
Yeah.
see it, he doesn't go quite as dense as the pattern is, and spaces them out a little bit. But yeah, it's still definitely a couple hundred stamp outs. I was starting on one myself and slowly losing my mind before I moved on to other projects for that day.
That checks.
That's one of those projects. Oh, you think you got a struck? I have a struck chisel with the exact same profile, so meant to be hit with a hammer, on like a handle, mainly my treadle hammer. So you'd think, oh yeah, the treadle hammer, it just does all the work of, it's basically a friend with a sledgehammer that can swing for you. Like, oh yeah, well, depressing that treadle 350 times in a few minutes span when it's hot as balls out
Your
is still not.
leg's gonna fall
Yeah,
off. Yeah.
tying back to item zero, as it were, in our discussion tonight, that this shit is in fact work.
Yeah.
As much as some people might want to insinuate otherwise. But yeah, I really like how he domes it all over with just a scrap piece of wood as the dishing swage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just overall a really nice piece. And so I'll be doing a few of those at some point. I'm killing the display capture now. Back to Mechanicus. Yeah, that's probably the long and short of what I've got going for now. Besides, Etsy orders and stuff for plant hooks. Plant
Gotta
hook
pay the
orders
bills
came in
after all.
today. Right? Yeah, gotta pay that and pay the corner store run bill.
Exactly right.
I actually sold a few more of my rebar fiddlehead ferns available on the Etsy
Nice.
right now today, and I'm starting to make those out of other materials. I have some other ones that resemble a sunflower. You can see on the Facebook page and Instagram. Yeah, so actually that we can do sort of a prelude to part 2 of this, as far as getting into one more item of the discussion tonight, and that concerns similar to item 1 of getting in the ring. This concerns looking around and seeing what people are and aren't making, and just sort of keeping how much you compete with others to a minimum. So this might sound hypocritical as far as, what I initially opened with being that, yeah, it doesn't matter who else is making what. Well, I guess that's not really what my point was. My point was that you don't have to be the cheapest or the absolute best or the most well photographed or whatever to
Make some sales. Yeah.
make some operative word, some sales. That said, definitely keep an eye out for listings that there aren't very many direct analogs to, and that at some point, mysteriously or otherwise, seem to disappear. Because in many cases, there is also a modicum of demand, for those listings. My rebar ferns are a classic example of one guy. I don't know if his shop's even still open, but he was selling them a few price points up from myself. Making what I have to make on them, but definitely was a little lower in price than what his were probably a couple years ago now. But yeah, sure enough, I don't remember if his account is closed or not because I don't remember its name. But he's definitely not selling those anymore. At which point I was able to step in.
Supply and demand.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was the item we discussed last go around that I have so eloquently labeled controversy because the original framing of it was basically based around the way I conducted the search was just looking up, running some different searches for different forged goods and finding accounts with lower than average overall review averages, and seeing why. Because Etsy is a one platform. There are others, I'm sure, where this is also true. Where you can very easily pull up reviews tied to particular sales and sale dates and what those items were, even if they're not an item that seller sells anymore. So you can do things like figure out, say, what items someone still has listed that they aren't making or they aren't shipping orders, whether they have their own life stuff going on, whatever. And is it back to the basic supply? It sounds cutthroat, but it's really just supply and demand in terms of you stepping in to supply something that there is a demand for that other suppliers are not caring to supply that demand for. Again, how do you undercut when there's nothing to be under?
Right. Yeah, no, 100%.
So definitely just learn how to run those searches, and you don't have to be, as I said, some SEO or internet marketing expert to really get some idea of what's going on when and where when it comes to this stuff. And I'll just spill the beans now because literally still I don't think anyone's making these either. I joke that I stumbled into my, for now, monopoly on the railroad spike stocking hangers because another seller was making them at a price point that was, even if he attaches no sane value to his time, was just way too low, which for me is really saying something. He hilariously also chose not to take any better photographs than a couple of them painted like a flat gray on top of a dresser being used as a TV stand that he only dusted like the area around where the spikes were set. So you saw a literal dust flying like a foot to the left. The photo looked like it was taken with a flip phone. Again, I sound like I'm being derogatory, but like I'm coming at this from the perspective of like there's no universe where like he was not equipped to do better. Like,
yeah, I mean, and that's just like
I had a 90.
Like,
yeah, right.
On.
Right, and again, 2009. This maybe was a slightly different conversation, but nowadays, I purely because I grew a little bit leery of it being out of security updates for the ability to get security updates for over 2 years. But it was not from like a functionality or like a deficiency standpoint that I swapped out my Pixel 3a last year, which is a $90 phone, new old stock on eBay, whose camera was and still is totally up to snuff for running a side business, for product photography, for running a side business. I said this was a little different conversation when I had my old hobbying YouTube channel 15 years ago, where a decent proper digital camera with camcorder capabilities was $300 or more. It's just not the case at this point, and you can literally, and this is I'm not saying this to insinuate I have any problem with, like, you can literally get a relative powerhouse of a smartphone on government assistance in many cases nowadays. Like there is no
Yeah,
excuse
there's zero excuse for
to
your
not.
shitty
Right?
photos.
Yeah, like there is. You have the tools available if you think, oh yeah, that's really the main perspective I'm coming from. If you think you need an iPhone 15 to do this crap and do it well, like no, you need to, use your eyes to get into and manipulate a couple of realistically very basic settings. Turn your flash off forever and ever. Amen. To start,
Yep.
um, and just like light the shot properly. Huge, I said keep my money where my mouth is and try to, all about lifting all boats up with us, or however that saying goes. Uh, Hilarious cheat code in my experience. Um, Overcast being probably the best weather, according to some
Lattice
folks I've
lighting,
talked to.
easiest.
Unless it's
Yeah,
like
any way to cheat
exceptionally
outside of
bright,
Lightroom.
unless it's exceptionally bright or dark out, literally just go outside.
Yeah, sure enough.
um,
Honestly.
I speak, from a somewhat spoiled perspective of having, the very nice back porch and some other areas with very nice high-end looking texture that I can use as a backdrop. But even if you don't, you can use I could probably take some pretty mean product photography on a sidewalk, a properly maintained front porch when it's, sunny or getting towards that later point in the day. Um, so yeah, think about that if you're ever wanting to photograph some product and having some trouble or not particularly enthused about how it's coming out. Um, yeah, so that's a nice little glimpse into the next few items we'll be discussing, probably as we open up the next podcast. What else? What else? What else? Yeah, that's our spiel about that. We don't have any fan mail yet. This is another segment I am blatantly plagiarizing from the Forgecast because I absolutely loved that it was something they allocated some time for. Within any given community or otherwise, Tom, is there, as far as projects, as far as your work, is there anyone particular you follow, whether it's a fairly recent follow or for quite a while, inspiring you? That can be anything from groups or folks that do similar work to yours in the airsoft space, the DIY space. Who has inspired you lately in any particular way?
I just, as a general rule, for most stuff maker related, definitely not for any airsoft stuff. But Adam
Yeah.
Savage has always been like a really, really big inspiration for a lot of my
Work?
just
Yeah.
sort of like general, work overall. Yeah, and I don't really know that there's anything specific recently that's come up that's really gotten me jazzed there. But there's a couple other folks that I did. Shirley Productions, who's a guy that does do sort of similar stuff in the airsoft field. He's got a YouTube channel, a little bit smaller. He does some really, really cool stuff. Guy's really good at CAD. Also, sort of follows sort of the general principles that I like to follow when it comes to 3D printing and just like releasing files for free and sort of open sourcing a lot of your stuff. And not to say that you need to do that. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with selling STLs and wanting to make some money off of your hobby too. But sort of broadening everybody's horizons by sharing your ideas and encouraging people to sort of get into this aspect of the topic, and also or aspect of airsoft rather, like the sort of maker side of it, and also just encouraging people to sort of work off of your ideas is really cool, and I appreciate that he sort of does that same thing.
Very cool. Yeah, just
Uh,
linked him in the chat and threw him a sub myself. Seems like it does some pretty cool stuff.
yeah.
Oh, he does a video on a double barrel 40 mic from last year. I'm sold already. Oh, and the Manticore. I forgot about the Manticore. But,
Yeah, no, he's got some really neat stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I know you said he was probably pretty much it for you lately. I'm trying to think of some myself. As obviously some folks already know who follow me a little while back, Tom, Sean, who helped moderate our chat earlier, and myself mostly concluded for now, to be continued, trademark, our work on our first successful one-day build-off, start to finish, of the Trench Crusade Trench Pilgrim helmet. That obviously came out quite well, is readily available to check out on our socials here. I'm not going to keep flip-flopping the screen share situation. But in a similar vein, last night I'm trying to find it now. I'm just pulling it out of chat because I have like short-term memory loss, specifically with screen names at this point. I am pulling it out of our chat with Evan, actually. The woman who did that artillery witch. Was it a cosplay or
Cosplay,
a
yeah, it's
cosplay?
fucking
I
incredible
can't
work.
remember. I'm opening the post now. I can't remember if it's wearable. It's absolutely appears to be. She goes by Box S Tara. So Box Tara. Boxstara. She is a costume designer out of New Zealand. Oh, that's cool. In her Instagram bio, her current build lineup is continually updated for some idea. So she
Oh, nice.
keeps everyone
That's an
apprised
idiot.
like what she's working on when.
Yeah.
One of them is the Artillery Witch from Trench Crusade. I forget what medium this even is. I think it's hundreds of pieces of filigree. Okay, and having to carve down and texture the base. The ornate trims are made from foam clay and shaped using cake molds. Obviously, there's some sewing elements or sewn elements as well. But yeah, so it's laser cut filigree. 5 months of placing and gluing by hand.
Yeah.
I'm just going to, because we have that power, I'm going to link her Instagram post about it, which even has her standing next to it for some sense of scale. Because this is not really a medium I'm entirely familiar with beyond the very broad strokes, but I mean, it is some really incredible workmanship. I don't know if anyone's really taken the Trench Crusade Artillery Witch cosplay-wise, anything close to this far that I've seen, and there's some talented cosplayers tackling this universe already.
Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head, anyway, that do to that degree. Yeah.
All I know is I want a shirt of the one fan art of her doing like a kickflip with the 1,000-pound bomb.
Hell yeah.
To go with my Limp Bizkit hat. But yeah, this was definitely one of my more interesting finds lately. And
seriously impressive. Yeah.
So the back of it. Yeah, I didn't even realize. I don't really even know what filigree is, but I didn't know it could be laser cut like that. So that was interesting to learn.
It's like those little like floral, like the stuff that's on the top of like columns and things like that, right? You'd call like filigree, like those little, like almost meant to look like leaves, that kind of stuff.
As defined in
Could be
the
wrong.
dictionary, ornamental work of fine, typically gold or silver wire formed into delicate tracery. So it's a form of intricate metalwork used in jewelry and other small forms of metalwork and jewelry.
Yeah, just looking up photos of it, it is like little like leaves and swirly bits. Yeah,
That-
like
that
it's
would-
almost like, you know, like a fleur de lis could be
Yeah.
like filigree on something.
So that's interesting. I wonder if the
Yeah.
laser cutting aspect was really more of like a final finish rather than, which implies that okay, that's why this took 5 months to get to a certain point, because a lot more of it was actually by hand than maybe a lot of people think when they hear laser cut. Because obviously the assembly was all handwork. Carved down and textured the base plates. The ornate trims are made from foam clay and shaped using cable. Yeah, it was just a really cool project that I haven't seen very much similar to in quite a while. Or really anything like this before that comes to mind, even in my heavier cosplaying days. So yeah, that's probably my coolest find of the past few days to a little while here. Yeah, I mean, we're closing in on 110 minutes now, but we still got a few people watching. That's kind of hilarious. But chat's quiet. It's about as air-conditioned as an M1 Abrams in Afghanistan, with how hard my PC has been running up here, streaming and sustaining this game. So I think we will call it tonight. But yeah, I'm glad to have finally gotten back into the groove after 3 weeks here and a consistent stream set. It seems like the handful of you that popped by did not enjoy yourselves. I know I plugged this kind of short notice to a lot of people who I'm sure will be checking out the recording when it goes up. But yeah, I think we'll call it about there. So Tom, thanks for helping me get this back off the ground here. I know this isn't going to be a recurring guest obligation. I want to have some different people on, do plenty solo ones as well. But just for the sake of getting a consistent schedule going, I did want to do a nice little,
get sick of me eventually.
A nice little soft relaunch. I'm sure they'd get sick of me already. and we'll go from there. But yeah, hopefully, we'll be at it next week. And by all means, shoot us some fan mail about any questions or concerns about the craft. We'll just be getting into the last of my items on the docket about just general advice on based on my experience running a micro business, as I've heard them called, when it comes to this work. And we'll take some more questions and talk a little bit about some other stuff to open things up next week. And then while we do the Q&A laterwards, play some games. Otherwise, I think we will